Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're tackling a topic that is literally the bedrock of a trustworthy modern enterprise. We're talking about building an ethical business. And let me tell you a little secret. True corporate ethics, they don't just start in the boardroom. They start deep within your supply chain. Today, we're diving into the ethics of the vendor due diligence process.
So I want you to think about something for a second. It's a bit of a provocative question, but who are you really doing business with? Because when you partner with a supplier, you aren't just buying their materials or their software. You are absorbing their business practices straight into your own. Thoroughly checking a vendor's background isn't just some boring bureaucratic red tape. It is a critical, dynamic strategy to protect your brand's reputation and make absolutely sure you aren't inadvertently funding unethical behavior. Okay, let's dive into this. To build our ethical fortress, we're going to construct it in 4 parts. 1. The ethical vendor shield. 2. Legal and financial baselines. 3. Operational integrity and reputation. And 4. Data, IP, and transparency. We've got 9 key checkpoints to hit across these 4 areas, so let's jump right in. All right, kicking things off with part 1, the ethical vendor shield, which is all about protecting your brand's integrity.
Let's make sure we're on the same page and define exactly what we're talking about here. Vendor due diligence is an evaluation process. You use it to figure out if a potential vendor can actually supply products that meet both your demand and your quality specs. But take a look at the second half of that definition. It's about assessing their market reputation and their overall operational integrity. We aren't just asking, hey, can they make the widget? We're asking, do they make the widget the right way?
Now, what's really interesting about this is just how much is on the line. The source text hits the nail on the head. Strict due diligence protects the brand from substandard goods, helps identify fraudulent practices, and mitigates future liabilities. The list goes on. Honestly, if you skip this process, you're leaving your front door wide open to fraud, to unlicensed shadow vendors, and to some massive financial risks. The ethical stakes literally could not be higher. Moving on to part 2, legal and financial baselines. This is the absolute foundation of a legitimate partnership.
So how do we actually establish this baseline? Well, we look at the very first 2 checkpoints of our 9-point list. Step 1, verify all legal licenses and registrations. This is totally non-negotiable. It proves the baseline legality of the business. But step 2 is where it gets really practical. You need to confirm adequate insurance for the factory, the machinery, and the employees. You might wonder, why is insurance an ethical concern? Well, imagine a fire breaks out at their factory. If they don't have adequate insurance, their employees are suddenly out of work, their business collapses, and your supply chain just grinds to a halt. Verifying their insurance ensures that the vendor has a safety net to recover, protect their workers, and restart supplies during an emergency.
Building right on top of that is checkpoint 3, checking their financial health and tax compliance. We need to verify bank details to ensure they use a legitimate company current account, no shady offshore personal accounts. We check for a valid GST number, we look at their promptness with tax filings, their income tax returns, and their annual general reports. Verifying these specific documents does 2 huge things. It proves the vendor is financially sound enough to actually fulfill your orders, and it proves they're highly compliant citizens of the business world. They pay their taxes, they play by the rules.
All right, let's shift gears to part 3, operational integrity and reputation. This is where we look at the human element and basic fairness.
To really get a read on that human element, we hit checkpoint 4, evaluating market reputation and customer feedback. We're going to look at 3 distinct areas here. First, their complaint history. This tells us exactly how their existing clients perceive their product quality. Second, customer service. Do they actually have a dedicated department for this? If they don't, that's a massive red flag regarding how they value their partners. And third, direct feedback. We want to read those direct reviews from existing customers to get the unvarnished truth about their operational integrity.
Which leads us right into checkpoint 5. It's a pretty stark contrast, really. Opaque and unfair policies versus fair, transparent, and customer-friendly ones. Ethical vendors don't hide behind confusing jargon when something goes wrong. We've got to evaluate their rules around product replacements, warranties, cancellations, and returns. If a vendor makes it impossible for their customers to return a defective product, trust me, that lack of fairness will eventually become your problem too.
Rounding out this section, we have checkpoint 6, evaluating business terms. Now, you might be thinking reviewing terms and conditions is just a job for the legal department. Actually, scratch that. It's a huge indicator of operational health.
A thorough check here reveals if they have sufficient cash flow to handle sudden emergencies. It shows what credit periods they operate under, and crucially, their promptness in fulfilling orders. A vendor struggling with cash flow is, for sure, a vendor who might cut corners on quality or labor just to make ends meet.
And that brings us to part 4, data, IP, and transparency. This is really the modern frontier of ethics. So, the crucial point here is how they handle the intangible stuff, protecting ideas and information. First up is data privacy policies. If you have online operations, this is make or break. You absolutely must verify they have crystal clear terms protecting customer data. Next is intellectual property. You have to investigate if they have any history of IP rights violations or legal cases. You do not want a supplier who steals designs, right? And finally, trade secrets. Can this vendor actually be trusted to securely handle your proprietary formulas? Thorough vetting here is literally the only way to sleep soundly at night.
Which brings us to our 9th and final checkpoint: international compliance and absolute transparency. If you're doing international deals, you need a full check on their compliance with laws. We're talking labor laws, environmental regulations, the whole shebang. But the ultimate hallmark of a truly reliable, ethical vendor is absolute transparency. They should willingly provide complete information regarding their product ingredients. No secrets, no hidden fillers, just pure transparency. And that wraps up our explainer for today. But before you go, I want to leave you with one vital question to think about. Is your supply chain as ethical as your brand? We've walked through the 9 key checkpoints today, from verifying basic licenses all the way to ensuring data privacy and ingredient transparency. Building an ethical fortress isn't just a one-and-done event. It's a continuous commitment to doing business the right way. I challenge you to look at your own vendors and make sure the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this incredibly important topic. Keep learning, keep building that fortress, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.